Everyone, it's Melanie here with Vintage Hill Studio. Today I'm doing a Seaside themed card with some modeling paste. This is what it looks like, and here are the ARTc stencils from Michaels. These are self-adhesive stencils. They are so cute. I was looking at this in the packaging before I even opened it, and I like the layout there along the bottom half. So I am going to try to replicate that on a card today. In order to do that, I wanted to measure this, and it will fit perfectly on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel. But before I get started, I am going to take a fine tip Sharpie here and just go around each of the borders of the images on this stencil. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to give myself a grid line for how this was laid out so that I can replicate that on my actual card panel. So by going around all of these edges, I'm giving myself a little template here, and you'll see how I'm going to use this in just a second. All right, I hope you can see my lines. They're very faint, but that's going to give me my guidelines for replacing these when I start working on this panel. So I've cut down a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel here out of white. And I will start with the sailboat, just getting that positioned on the front of my panel here. And then I'll go back and look at those lines that I drew with my Sharpie and see how these are going to align. Again, I really like the way that was laid out in the packaging, so I'm trying to replicate that on my panel, and these guidelines are going to help me achieve that. Okay, now you can see I'll bring it back over and just look at the lines that I drew with my Sharpie to see if I'm on track, and yes, looks like they're aligning pretty nicely. So I'll do that with each one of these stencils, and then I'll be ready to move on with the next step. Now this is the modeling paste. It is a high definition white modeling paste, and then I'll also use some Color Splash watercolors to add some color to the modeling paste. So I'm just going to do a drop from each one of these colors. I've got an orange, a red, a yellow, and a green. And there is also a purple. But I'm going to try to stick to just 4 colors and intermingle those on each one of my images just for a cohesive look. So sometimes if you just work with a limited number, even for a divided panel card like this, it makes it more uniform and cohesive. So you can see I'm just going to mix these watercolors right into that modeling paste and come out with some beautiful shades here. And if, like, the yellow's too bright, just add a little orange and that will rectify that. See how it just kind of tones that down a bit? That's what I'm going for. Now on the last little dab, I did a yellow and a green, which should make blue, but it didn't really work out. So this one's going to give me a little bit of trouble. So I'll go in and add a little more yellow, see if I can get that up to a nice green color. Okay, that's not working. So I keep going back and forth. Maybe I need a little more modeling paste, because now as I add more drops of my watercolor, it's getting a little bit soupy. So you just need to be cognizant of how much liquid you're adding to your modeling paste. You still want it to have a good body, so add more paste if needed. Okay, still a little bit soupy, but I'll deal with that at another time. I'm still not getting the blue that I was working for, so finally I keep adding yellow to this green, which should make a blue, but it's just not happening for me. Trial and error, this is part of art, right? Experimenting, see what works. Or conversely, what doesn't work. So now I'm going to just bring over my last watercolor bottle here, and it is a purple. And I'll get this mixed together, and it comes up with a really nice shade of like an eggplant. It's almost bordering on a gray, but that's okay. I think that will go with the theme of my Seaside card. Just watch that consistency again. If you get too much liquid, add a little more modeling paste. You really need that modeling paste to have a good body to it, so that when you apply this over your stencils, you have that bit of dimension that we're going for with the modeling paste. Okay, now as I get to working on getting this put down over my stencils, I'm going to use the modeling paste as it is, just in its white form first, and this little spatula. Kind of tip it to the side at an angle here and scrape it across your stencils. Pat it down into the recesses, and then you're going to scrape it across just to make sure it goes into all the nooks and crannies of your stencil. Try to stay away from those borders. If you get a little bit on there like I do, don't fret about it. It won't show in your finished panel. I'll show you how we're going to deal with that a little bit later. Okay, now while your modeling paste is still wet, you're going to do a wet on wet technique here by adding your other color. Now this is going to add a lot of visual interest because when it blends with the modeling paste underneath, it gives you this cool, like, not really marbled effect, but it's not flat. So it's giving you some interest on your panel with this wet on wet technique. And again, by sticking to 4 colors, you're going to gain the cohesiveness and the visual pleasantness of not having too much going on. I mean, it's already busy with the panels with the different images, so that's why you want to stick to a limited color palette. If that makes sense, that's what I'm going for here. Hey, and knowing what you want to do and being able to explain it is not always that easy. So thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you learned something from some of my mistakes and some of my successes. So here on the sailboat, I'm actually going to blend 2 colors, that purplish gray color and also some yellows. And because we're working wet on wet, these are going to blend beautifully together. Just have fun with this. Don't really stress about anything. Just go with it. Do the best you can. If you don't get as smooth of a finish as you would have liked, just go with that as well. It just adds more interest to your front panel to not have everything so perfect and pristine. You see how these colors are blending together? You won't really know how this looks until you remove the stencils, but I think you'll be really pleased with this wet on wet technique. Keep working through all of the images here. These are very finely cut stencils, so they make a very nice panel for the front of your cards. And because it is that low tack adhesive on the back, when you go to remove your stencils, it's not going to tear your paper. So that's a plus to using these self-adhesive stencils from Michaels. Okay, and then very carefully you want to remove your stencils and keep your hands out of that modeling paste because it's going to take a little bit of time for the modeling paste and the watercolor solution to dry. So just take your time here and enjoy the process. Again, it was fairly difficult not to get outside the border of these stencils. They're very fine and very close to the edges. So if, like me, you get a little of that modeling paste on the outside, really don't worry about it. Don't try to get it off. I'm telling you it will not show at the end of your project. And even if it did, chalk it up as character. That's what I do. Just say it's got a little bit extra character. All right, so we'll just finish this up very quickly. You can add as many or as few of colors as you want on each of your images, and they will just kind of blend together because you are working in the wet on wet, which makes for a very nice blend, no matter what colors you choose to use or mix and match together. Could have sped through this, but I want to share the whole process with you and how I work around things. Sometimes you have a little bit of oops and everything can be fixed, so don't fret about that stuff. Just enjoy your project. Working on the very last star here, and then I'll remove these stencils. And while we let our modeling paste and our watercolor dry, you can go and rinse off these stencils. Now it is watercolor and also the modeling paste is water-based, so it's very easy to clean up with just soap and water. Now once everything is dry, about an hour or so, you can feel if it's dry or not. Go ahead and place your stencils back over the dried images. These will go down very easily because they are self-adhesive again. And then you just simply want to use some painter's tape. I usually run this over my hands because the oil from my hands makes it not quite as tacky. And you want to place this over the main part of your images. Don't go over the border of your stencils, just go over the part that has the modeling paste and your watercolor. And you don't want to press real hard over the modeling paste, you're just trying to really cover that because we're going to go with some ink here and a blending brush and go around the edges of our stencils. So here I'm going with the Frayed Burlap and my blending brush, and I'm just going to go in between the stencils and around the perimeter of my panel and give it a light brushing of this Frayed Burlap. And I'm using a little heavier hand on the corners just to add a little more color on each of the corners to kind of anchor down my panel. Okay, and then I'm coming in with an Oxide, though this goes on a little heavier and it is more opaque, meaning more solid, and this is the Stormy Sky. I always think you need a little bit of blue on a Seaside themed card. And by mixing this with the Frayed Burlap, it actually gives me a kind of bluish gray shade, which is perfect for what I was going for with the theme of this card. Then I'm just going to bring my mini mister. This is allowing me to spritz just little droplets of water on the Oxide inks and the Distress inks, and what it does is those inks react with water. And I just take a paper towel and it kind of blends the colors together and also leaves a little more splotches for dimension, at least visual dimension. And look how this turns out, just like on the packaging. I love it. What a cute little panel. So I will get ready to get this put together for my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. Again, as I mentioned earlier, all the supplies and dimensions are listed in the description on my YouTube channel, so just scroll on down there if you're interested in seeing exactly what I used to make this card. One of the last little details I want to do is bring over a little bit of this twine. I love the stripe. I think that says nautical. I chose this brown and white so it didn't take away from the colors on my panel. So just trying to be cognizant here in the finishing touches. Okay, and I will tie a little knot at the bottom. Now I don't tie this as very tight to begin with, so I can slide it up and down until I have it positioned where I think it looks best, and then I will pull that knot a little tighter. All right, now to further secure that twine on the back and give my panel a little dimension, I'm going to pop it up off the card front with some foam tape. I'll get that put down on my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base, and we will call this card done for today. I am so glad you dropped by to visit me. I hope you get inspired to look at some of the stencils you may have on hand. See how they are in the packaging. Maybe that would work out well for a card panel for you too. And the modeling paste, don't be afraid to try that. It's very easy to use. You could use acrylics, inks, anything to color it. You could even do the modeling paste as it is in white. I am just so thrilled that you dropped by to visit today. If you're new to my channel, feel free to become a subscriber. If you're an existing subscriber, thank you for stopping by every week to visit me. And I hope you gained some inspiration from this and that you will give it a try as well. Happy crafting, everyone, and see you next week.